All right, this is another video showcasing one of the coding projects I've done. This is something I've worked on the past year and a half or so, and there are a couple of components to it that are used from other projects in the past, but for the most part, it's all new code that I've developed just for this project. So this is called OpenWater. Which is a dumb name, I know, and I think has been used many times before. But I'm not trying to copyright anything, so I just call it that. But the purpose of this is to project ocean water temperatures via email to its users. So I'm a part of a open water ocean swimming group on every Wednesday morning, and there was this issue where I really wanted to know the water temperature every time I was going to swim, because it's like specifically a cold water sort of thing. So we swim without wetsuits on, so the water temperature is very important. And every Wednesday morning, I would have to look up on either Surfline or some other ocean surf forecast website to find out the temperature of the water. And usually these kinds of websites are more centric to surf conditions like wave height rather than water temperatures. So usually the water temperature is somewhere further down on the web page. And having to visit surfline.com or use the app, usually there are a lot of ads and it takes some time to load the page. So it's kind of a hassle to find the water temperature. And this is something that I really wished I could know the water temperature on an instant basis, or if I had like a notification or an email or something in the morning that told me the water temperature of the ocean. So I made this, and the objective was to have an email arrive in my inbox with the temperature of the ocean that morning, local to me. So all I had to do was open an email in the morning, and I would know what the water temperature would be. So I successfully made that, and I'll walk you through the code now. This is basically just for me and a couple of my buddies who also receive emails from this. But hopefully I can develop a little bit further so it can be used for like really any other ocean water creature or surfer buddy, or other children of Poseidon, you could say. So there's more work to be done on this, but I thought I'd show you what I have thus far. So this is built entirely in Java. There's another component to this project that I'll do another video on I made in Python, but this is all Java. So you can see this takes advantage of the Amazon Simple Email Service SDK, which is a really convenient API for sending emails, and it allows you to use a Amazon mail server. So, I like to make my projects pretty heavily object oriented, so that's the case for this one for sure. So you can see we have a person class and a temperature reading class as well, and I'll walk through those in a second. So this first block of code is really kind of just a text-based UI. So I made it so that in the terminal you can open up this program as a Java executable. So I had this as a jar, Java runtime file. So it's an executable where you can open it up via text via a terminal, and you can give it all the names of each person you want to have an email go to, as well as the email address. So that's what's doing here. And you check each entry uncomprehensively, meaning that there's still possible room for error despite these checks. Basically, all I do is check for an @ symbol and a period and no spaces, because every email address has to have an @ symbol and a period, and then they can't have a space in it. And it'll throw an error, or not throw an error, but it'll give you a message and not record it if you enter the email address incorrectly. The next part of the UI asks you for which state you'd like to see. So in here, all you have to do is add the two-letter abbreviation for the state for the water temperatures you want to receive. So for me, I have California because that's where I live and that's where I want to see the water temperatures for. And this will list all of the water temperatures from California, and then you can do Maine or any other state. And there actually are some Great Lakes water temperatures available, so you can do Midwest states. I don't think there are any for Illinois, but like you can do Michigan or Wisconsin or anything like that. And once you add one person, so that's a name, an email address, and the states they want, then it'll keep looping, and you can keep adding people and email addresses until you press enter. So right here, you can see we're creating a person object. We're creating a person object here, and this is a class that I made, and I'll switch over to that so you can see how that works. So this is a pretty basic class, and I like to make person classes because I think it's just easier when you have a project of this type to keep reservation of memory for someone's name and email address and then their locations. It's easy to keep it all together in one object. So each person has a name, an email address, and then an array list of temperature reading objects for location. So these are the places where they're going to receive water temperature data from. So temperature reading, you can see this array list is a temperature reading type object. So we'll go over that in a second. But you can see there's a pretty typical constructor, accessors, and then where it gets interesting here is the add location method. You have to give it a temperature reading object. And again, we'll go over that after this. And that adds it to the locations array list. This add whole state method, you give it a list of every location, every temperature reading for a specific state. So each state has multiple water temperature readings. So California will have ocean temperatures for Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego, all those places. And this is a list where it adds every temperature reading for a whole state to this person's list of temperature reading locations. Contains location method. This just basically checks to see if a certain temperature reading location is already added to this person object's list of locations. Temperature reading, again, like I said before, I like to keep things object oriented, and I think it makes it a lot easier if you have this temperature reading object. So this is a specific location within a state. So this might be San Diego, and so that would be the location name and the published date. What's interesting is the data that I'm getting from the internet is broadcast every couple hours, I think, and I'll show you in a little bit where I'm getting this temperature reading data. But the published date is important because the temperature of the ocean right now in January or February is going to be different from April or June, or even different parts of the day. And then we have these double variables, Fahrenheit temperature and Celsius temperature. It's not really that important, but I just thought it'd be easier if you had both contained within the object. Pretty standard constructor here. The only interesting thing is the constructor always takes Fahrenheit temperature, and then I just convert it here to a Celsius temperature. It's easier to do that than to have to give it two parameters. And then pretty standard mutators and accessors here. Equals. All this is just I just made an overrided equals method here, just to, I guess it's not overrided because it doesn't extend. This class doesn't extend any other class, so this is not overrided. That was incorrect for me to say that. But this equals method just checks to see if this temperature reading is the same as another one. Okay, so we'll go back to the main method. If you recall, what we were looking at before was this text UI, where we add all the names and temperature readings and email addresses and everything here. So moving on, this is a pretty important part of this entire project. Read weather RSS. So I wrote this method to pull up a XML feed, which is at this URL right here. So this is done by the NOAA, which is like National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, I think, something like that. And they publish this. They're the ones that publish this data feed of water temperatures around the country. So I'll show you the web page now. There might be a gap in. There might be a gap for a second. Okay, so this is the NOAA XML feed that's published. This is a dynamic page, so if you see there are dates for all these temperature readings, and they update. I'm not sure exactly how frequently they update. I think each water temperature buoy is different in how frequently it pushes this data. But you'll see there's all these different locations. There's Juneau. It's alphabetical by state, so there's Juneau, Alaska, all these places in Alaska, and then you get down to here's more Alaska. You get down to Maine. Actually it's not alphabetical. My mistake. But Boston, there's Massachusetts, Rhode Island. So there's all these parts of the country with water temperature data. And this is where I get my data, and you can see it's updated in real time. So, for example, in Money Point, Virginia, right now the ocean is 46.8 degrees, very cold, and there's a whole lot of data here. But you can see it's in XML format, which makes it a lot easier to process. It makes the data easier to process. So I'm going to go back to my code, if you'll bear with me for a second. Okay, so we're back in my code, and you can see I have this method read weather RSS. So what this does is it takes in it creates this URL object for it creates this URL object where it creates a URL object for the XML feed of where this water temperature data is, and then uses a buffered reader to process this data. So you can see when I made this was actually my first time using XML, so I wasn't totally sure how to do it, and I kind of brute forced it and didn't really do it methodically. So you'll notice that there are a lot of hard-coded values in here. So if I were to use a different XML feed, I would have to totally change everything around, because you'll see there are these hard-coded values in here, +9, -10. So this really only works with this water temperature feed, but it works great. So that's what's important, at least for this project. And we have. So once we read this in, we now have all of the water temperature data loaded into memory for this program. So we have a couple other methods here. Add temperature reading. This is pretty simple. All it does is just add a. I wanted to make this helper method to this one, because I like to do helper methods because I think it's makes code easier to read. This basically just adds a temperature reading to the list of all the temperatures, which is here. So this is a array list that's a part of So you'll see that this temperature is this temperature. You'll see that this adds a temperature reading object to the array list of temperatures that's within this class. So once we have all this data worked out, and we have all the temperatures and email addresses and names of everyone corresponding to person objects, then we can send the temperatures. So as I said before, this utilizes the Amazon Simple Email Service API. So AWS makes a pretty cool service where you can use their mail servers to send emails rather than using your own email address. So you'll see that basically we construct the email using this HTML body object. So when you send an email, you can write HTML for that email. So it's not very the formatting is not very fancy. It's just it's pretty basic. It's just basic HTML, but that's what these additions to this string are. So it's just really all it is just a string of HTML code that then gets put into an email body. So this is just building. This is building up. All this code is just basically just building up the email to send, and then you can see that once we have all this put together, we send the email, and it's done through the simple email service, which is really cool and really convenient. When I made this before, there's actually API available to send emails from a Gmail mail server. It's possible to do that, but I wanted to continue experimenting with all the things that are available on AWS, so I used the Amazon Simple Email Service because I thought it would be cooler. So then now we have these last two methods are just for testing, basically, so they don't always get used. So now I'll show you how this works on the back end and what an email looks like. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I'll show you how it works. Okay, so right now I have a terminal open for an Amazon EC2 instance. I basically thought it would be cooler if we did this in the AWS cloud rather than locally. So right now this terminal window is I'm SSH'd into one of my EC2 instances. Actually, the EC2 instance that runs this program every day. So I was able to make this program into a Java executable. So it's a jar file. I just called it weather. So this is you'll now see the text-based user interface that I made, and all you do is add in a name and email address. So I'll do my name and then my email address. And then it will ask me which states I'd like to see. So let's do California, Massachusetts, Florida, and then Alaska. And then once I'm done, I just press enter. And now I can either add another person or I can be done. So let's add another person. We'll do myself again with another one of my email addresses. So we'll just do a nickname of mine and then another email address. And for this one, let's do Maine, Oregon, and Washington. And then same thing. So now I'm done, and it's going to do its thing. It just takes a second, and now it's done. So now we'll go over to my inbox, and we can see that I will have received an email with some water temperature data. So bear with me for 1 second. So now you can see that I've received water temperature data for all these different locations in California, which was what I put in initially. You can see the water is pretty cold in California, but still swimmable in my opinion. And then I got Massachusetts, Florida, all these different cities, and I have it set to send the Fahrenheit temperature. That's just because that's my preference, but you'll see that these are all at different times because these buoys operated by the NOAA push data at different times, not on a consistent basis. So that's why these are at different times. And they are all set to, since all of the buoys are in different parts of the country in different time zones, they're all set to UTC. It's just because it makes it easier. I'd like to add some functionality to make it so that it shows the temperature in either this time zone of the recipient or the time zone of the location from where the data was sent. So this was my personal email, and then we can also check my other email, and similar thing. It sent the data for all these different locations. So I actually have this program has been modified a little bit. So I made it so that it sends. I changed it so that you could specify only certain cities and certain buoys. So the email that I receive every day is this one. So I get Los Angeles and Oceanside are the buoys that are closest to me. So that shows me the water temperature that's most accurate to what I will encounter. And then I also have some other buoys just because I'm interested in that. But a few of my surf buddies also get this email, and they get the locations that they're personally interested in. And that's done with, I didn't show the functionality in this video, but I can do it in another one. But that is done by the program reading in a CSV file with all of the names, email addresses, and specific city locations. That's a different functionality. But anyway, this is how my program OpenWater works, and it's been really great because it's made it a lot more convenient for me to know the temperature of the ocean before I go for my Wednesday morning swim. I get that. Oh yeah. The other thing is another functionality I added is in addition to receiving specific cities and buoy locations, I made it so that the Java executable runs on a cron script. So from my EC2 instance. So every basically every morning at 5 a.m. Pacific time, this email goes out. So my buddies and I all will know the water temperature every morning, which is very convenient and nice. So there's some more functionality to this application that I'll do a second video on. I thought my last video was a little bit too long, and I'm hoping this one isn't too long, but I don't want to. I want to keep it as short as possible, so I'll do a second video for some other functionality for this application. And well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with another one.